2 days from now, at this very hour, a man will likely be taking his last steps, eating his last meal, before he's executed. A man who he says that he is innocent. His name is Ivan Cantu, a death row inmate. He was convicted of murdering his cousin and the cousin's fiancée some 23 years ago. His lawyers asked for a delay after new evidence surfaced in the case. But just a short time ago, the Texas Parole Board recommended the request be denied, leaving Cantu's fate in the hands of Governor Greg Abbott. Now, this comes as the head of the jury that decided Cantu should die is asking Abbott for that delay. In an op-ed, Jeff Calhoun writes in part, "Simply put, we, the jurors, did not hear the truth you assume you would hear from a person under oath. Bottom line, I feel like I was fooled." We'll be speaking with Calhoun in just a moment, but first, CNN's Ed Lavandera has more on this case.
Ivan Cantu is just days away from death. For almost 24 years, Cantu says he's maintained his innocence in the murders of his cousin, James Mosqueda, and his fiancée, Amy Kitchen, and he wants to talk about the case. Which brings us to this moment. Sitting down with Cantu, who is not only an inmate on Texas death row, but also a former grade school classmate of mine.
How are you, man?
I'm doing good. Hey, thanks for coming out. It's a blessing. Thank you so much. It's good to see you.
It's been almost 40 years, man.
Been a long time, yeah.
Cantu was sent to death row the same year I started my career at CNN. The evidence against him seemed overwhelming. Cantu's girlfriend and her brother testified he committed the murders. Cantu's fingerprint was found on a magazine inside the murder weapon. Bloody jeans and socks with the victim's blood was found inside his apartment, and his cousin's car, police say he stole, was also found outside his apartment.
I gotta be honest with you, I remember thinking, man, I don't see how he didn't do it, right? It seemed pretty open and shut to me.
At face value, when you look at all the evidence, it was an open and shut case.
You've always maintained your innocence?
Absolutely, from day one. Give me a new trial with the team and with the attorney that I've got today, but I want them to know, hey, stop the madness.
But in 2019, the case against Cantu started to look different. Matt Duff, a TV producer turned private investigator turned podcaster, discovered Cantu's case and started digging. He's produced more than 40 episodes on the case in a podcast called Cousins by Blood.
I went into his innocence claim investigation with an open mind, knowing that he very well could be guilty. He could be just trying to, spin a story. I think if anybody takes the time to just look at his case with an open mind, you can't say that he doesn't deserve a new trial.
Ivan deserves his fair day in court.
Cantu's supporters say he was framed. Cantu alleges in court filings that James Mosqueda was a big-time drug dealer who owed someone $250,000. Duff says testimony from the two key witnesses is riddled with falsehoods. Cantu's girlfriend, Amy Betcher, testified Cantu committed the murders around midnight on November 3rd, but Cantu's legal team says two forensic pathologists say the victims were actually killed hours later on the morning of the next day. She also testified Cantu took a Rolex watch from his cousin. The Rolex, it turns out, was never missing and returned to the victim's family after the murders. Amy Betcher also testified she threw the bloody jeans with the victim's DNA in their apartment trash can, but the jeans don't have Cantu's DNA and are 2 sizes too large. In court filings, Cantu also says 2 days before the victims' bodies were discovered, a man in a pizza delivery uniform came to his apartment and said his cousin owed money, then fired a gunshot into Cantu's apartment. That bullet matched bullets in the victims.
The pizza man.
The pizza man's story was dismissed, but Matt Duff says they've identified the person, and he matches the description of one of his cousin's drug suppliers.
Do you remember being on the stand?
Yeah.
Amy Betcher's brother, Jeff, also testified that Cantu told him he planned to kill his cousin. Amy Betcher died in 2021, and shortly after, Jeff Betcher called the prosecutor's office and recanted his testimony.
I lied. I don't think my statement should be counted.
Prosecutors say Jeff Betcher's interview has been misconstrued and that ultimately the concerns about his testimony were alleviated. And the district attorney, who has the power to re-examine the case, says he remains, quote, fully convinced that Ivan Cantu brutally murdered 2 innocent victims and that this belief is, quote, anchored in the undeniable evidence presented at trial.
How do you react to that?
I don't think they're looking at the same case.
At that trial, Cantu's public defender attorneys never called a single witness.
I think if you just lay it all out, even though the state's case was so strong, if you look at it from the other direction, then people would see this case in a completely different way.
Cantu is scheduled to die on February 28th.
I just have to brace for impact. The worst case scenario, they ignore everything and place me on that gurney and kill me.
It's bizarre and kind of surreal to think about, how different paths our lives have taken. I've always struggled on making sense of what's happened to you.
Thank you for saying that.
Take care of yourself.
Ed Lavendera, CNN, Dallas.
Our thanks to Ed for that. And for more on this story, I want to bring in Jeff Calhoun. He was the head of the jury that recommended that Cantu should die for this case. Jeff, you are now backing a delay for Cantu. You say that you've been fooled. You regret your vote in favor of an execution. Why is that?
Well, the reason I say I've been fooled is because what you just showed earlier, one of the key witnesses admittedly lied. And when something like that happens and something to this magnitude, in a situation where this may be one of the most important decisions I will have ever made, and that's why it led me to go ahead and carry out and be a voice in this situation, because I don't feel like we got a complete trial presented to us now that I look back on the new evidence.
Do you feel convinced now that Cantu is actually innocent?
No. This doesn't point to any innocent or guilty verdict. It simply points to being thorough in the justice of his case.
So what is your reaction now to the Texas Parole Board declining to recommend clemency or reprieve of this execution?
Yeah, well, there's things that they see that I don't see, and there's things that I see that they don't see. My purpose is making sure that my perspective is recognized. It's very difficult to recognize a perspective like mine and the other jurors because we were there witnessing all this. I simply want that perspective to be recognized, and I've got a small voice. There's a lot going on here in Texas, as you're well aware. I want to amplify my voice just for a moment and ask that my perspective be recognized by the state of Texas. And this is a state and an administration, I might add, that I fully support.
Governor Greg Abbott is now the decider here. It's not just you, as you said. There are other voices, including celebrities like Kim Kardashian, who are calling for this execution to be halted because of some of this doubt, some of this new evidence. Do you think that this will have an impact on the governor's decision?
Well, I don't know about celebrities. I don't know how much weight he'll put into that. I don't know the governor. I've watched him over the time that he's served for us here in Texas. I admire the man. But I think that, my voice, hopefully, coming from one of his supporters, perhaps will be heard, and maybe he'll have an opportunity to see and hear what I have to say. And I really don't see any issue with postponing an execution to look through this new stuff, because really it's more about it's not so much about the new evidence in my mind. It's a fact that one of the witnesses admittedly lied, and there's a lie in there one way or the other. We need to shake it all out.
So what do you want to see happen here? You said a postponement. Do you think a new trial is possible? Do you think that clemency is necessary given the doubts? What do you want to see?
Well, I'm no lawyer. I don't know the processes, but I do believe the next would be a hearing. First, postpone the execution, have a hearing, look at the evidence, and if it warrants a new trial, then that's what should be done. I'm not jumping to any conclusions here. I'm going through this methodically as we went through the case as jurors.
All right. Jeff Calhoun, thanks for sharing that perspective with us.
Thank you.
And next, does